Welcome again with me, Captain Oka Pribawa. And in this lesson, I'm going to try to provide you with a brief explanations about the some useful expressions that we usually use when we are presenting something in English. But before we start talking about the expressions, I need also to inform you that expressions means that some phrases that we usually use to express certain ideas. It is just like the science on the, let's say that when you are driving a car and then you want to know some information about the way or the road that you are driving on, then you need some science to help you understand what you are dealing with or what kind of streets that you are now driving on and then what you can see around the way. That's what we call expressions. For example, if you want to know where the restaurants and then later on the expressions means that just the same as the science, it provides with the information that there will be a restaurant in front of us. So that is the function of expressions in language. So let's talk about the first expressions, which is greeting. So the first things that we usually do in presentation is that provide or give or greet the audience. And how do we do that? It's just very simple. It's very normal actually in formal situations. We always use the word like good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on the time when the presentation is going on. And you can add those greetings by saying ladies and gentlemen. For example, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or you may say good morning, everybody. And simply after that you just can say welcome to my presentations. And then after greeting, usually it is sometimes important also to let you know, okay, sorry, to let the audience know about who you are. And then we usually introduce also ourselves. But remember, in presentations, don't make a very long introductions. Just give a brief introduction about yourself. That usually, if you are in the military environment, we usually only mention three things: name, rank, and also the job. For example, I am Captain Akapribawa, and I am the interpreter of English of the RDB 39B 2021. So that is one example what information that you need to deliver when you are introducing yourself in the presentation. And then after introduction, usually also, and this is the very important thing that you need to do because your audience really need to know about this one, that you tell them about the topic of your presentations and then how what expressions that we usually do when you are like presenting or telling your audience about the topic. This is two examples that I can give to you today. The first is that the topic of my presentation is, and then you mention what topic that you have. Everybody, maybe you can read together. You can read together like the topic of my presentation is, or you can say today I'd like to talk to you about, and then again you mention what presentations that you have in that occasion. And then after topic, and this is also a very cultural thing, all right, in the military environment, especially we tell them, we tell the audience also about the overview, the things or the scope that we have in the presentations. That usually, and then to do that, we usually say like this: I'm going to focus on, okay, and then you tell about all of the scope that you have. You can say I'm going to focus on, or you may say I'm going to look at, or you may say I'm going to deal with, okay, or you may say also I'm going to talk about. So remember, they have just the same meaning and they can like interchangeable. You don't have to worry. You can use any of words that you like, or you can say like this: I've divided my presentation into three main parts, for example. It really depends. If you only have three, then let's say three. I give you the example whenever you have three scopes. So first of all, or you may say first of all, you may say also firstly. I'll talk about and then mention what is the first main point that you have. And then after that, you say second, we'll look at, and then at the end, or this is the last one, usually we use the word finally. And finally, I'll explain what. Okay, so again, depends on the topic or the main points that you have. And then uh, some presenters, they don't want to be interrupted in the middle of the presentations. Maybe you are one of them. All right. If you want to say that to audience that you don't want your presentations to be interrupted, you don't accept any questions during the presentations, you can say like this. I give you two examples here. So there'll be plenty of time for questions at the end of my presentations. All right, you can read. We can read together. Let's read together. There'll be plenty of time for questions at the end of my presentation. Or you can say, let's read together. I'd appreciate if you could leave any question you may have until the end of my presentations. I know it's quite longer, probably takes time for you also to familiarize yourself with these expressions, but this is very commonly used in real presentation actually. Okay, and however, okay, if you welcome questions in the middle of your presentation, means that let's say that you are very lenient persons, you accept any questions even during presentations, you don't mind people interrupt you during the presentation, you can say like this. If you have any questions during presentation, feel free. You can say feel free, or you can say also don't hesitate, okay, to interrupt at any time. Let's read together. If you have any questions during presentations, feel free to interrupt at any time. Or you can say, if you have any questions during presentations, don't hesitate to interrupt at any time. So those are two expressions that we usually use, right, in these circumstances. And then once you come to the first point, you need also to give the signs to the audience that you are now starting the main or the body of your presentation. Then how to do that? Okay, this is one of example of expressions that we tend to use. I'd like to begin by informing you, okay, or I'd like to begin by telling you, okay. So again, it really depends on what you are talking about, what point that you have in the presentations. But the thing that you have to remember, when you use the word by, okay, you need to follow this word by inform, like informing, telling, reporting, clarifying, or any words that you can use. Just don't forget to use verb ing after the word by. Okay. Or you can say like this. Let's start with and then tell about your point. Okay. Or you can simply say, so let's get started. And then start to explain about the first point that you have in your presentations. And then when you move, okay, sorry, but before you move, you finish one point. After you finish one point, you need also again to give the sign to the audience that you finished the first point already. Okay, and to do that, you can say like this. So that covers everything I need to say about, and then mentions the point that you have told to the audience. Or you can say that concludes my first topic. Okay, if it is second topic, then you can say that my second topic. All right. So you need also to adjust the expressions based on the situations that you are dealing with. Okay, and then now, how about when you are moving to a new point? After you finish one point and then you are trying to move to a new point, what expressions that we use? This is one of them. Now, let's move on to my next topic. or you may say topic, you may say point, and then you say which is, and then tell what is your next point. Okay, now let's read together. Let's start practicing a bit about this expression. Now let's move on to my next topic, which is blank blank blank. Okay, and then tell the audience about your topic. Or you can say like this. Let's turn now to, and then again you mention your point. Okay, or you can simply say moving on to, and then mention the point that you are going to talk about after the first point or the second point that you, or the points that you have already discussed previously. Okay, so now sometimes to help us in presentations, we use some visual media to assist the audience to clearly understand what we are talking about. And then to pay or to get their attention, so if you want them to really focus on the media you use, you can say like this. As you can see on the slide, if you are using slide, then you say slide, you can say picture. It really again depends on what media that you are using. Okay, or you may say, take a look at this, okay? And again, you mention what visual media that you are using at the time. Okay, or you may say this slide clearly shows or highlights or whatever. Slide there can be also replaced by depending on the things that you are using or the visual media that you are using in your presentation. Now, a lot of the time, okay, there is some points that require more explanation. Means that not all the content of our presentation sometimes easily understood. Some of them need a very detailed explanations. And if you want to give more detailed explanation on certain point, these are some expressions that we can use. First, you may say, let me expand on this point. Or you can say, I'd like to elaborate on this point for a few minutes. Yeah? All right. And then reminding the audience. And again, this happens a lot in the real presentations that uh, you are trying to say some things, but actually you said it already, right? You mentioned it already either earlier or at the beginning of the presentation. So to remind the audience that you mentioned this thing already, you can say like this. As I said at the beginning, okay, or you may say this relates to what I was saying earlier, right? Or you can say this ties in with what I said at the start of my talk or of my presentation. Ties in means that something is related to another thing. When two things tie in, they just like have very strong correlation. Okay, so summarizing, and this is well, again, very essential in presentation. Some people, they love summarizing. They mention again the things that they have already been explaining by saying things like this one. Before closing my presentations, I need to summarize my presentation. We look at three main points today. So for example, I only had three main points. Previously, that I said three main points. And again, it really depends on your presentation situations. Okay. And after summarizing, usually we conclude the presentations by saying this. Okay. To conclude, I'd like to say, and then you mention what is your conclusion. Or you may say, before we finish, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. Okay. So these are things usually uh, the presenter at the end of the presentation, of course, they have like a purpose or intention or aim why they are presenting some things and what exactly they want to say. And then sometimes they just trying to conclude all of the things into one sentence, one or two sentences. So before doing that, these are two types or two examples of expressions that you can use. To conclude, I'd like to say that English is very important for all of the army personnel. That is for example, right? So or you may say, before we finish, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. Okay. So these are two some examples. And remember, you can use other thing that if you know Okay, but this is only suggestion that I can give it to you in this lesson. All right, so after all of the things, okay, it is very common also the presenter then next ask the audience to or invite the audience to ask questions. So to do that, this is a very common expression that we have or we use in presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer now. So this is very common expressions to invite the audience to ask questions to the presenter. Okay. And then, of course, after the session of asking and answering questions is done, yeah, we usually also always thank the audience for participating in our and for attending the presentation and also for participating in it. So what can we say? Thank you very much for your attention, or you may say thank you very much for your attention, or you may say thank you very much for your time. Okay, or just simply say thank you for listening. Ah, thank you very much. That is the only thing that I can inform you or explain to you. And I'm really sorry if it doesn't really help you, but I really expect that all of the explanation in this video helps you in understanding about how to present in English. And see you again in the next lesson.